Hey, it's Mark here again with another episode of Brands Investors Love. And today I am super stoked to have Edosa Odaro with me, or Ed as he's affectionately known. Ed is the author of Making Data Work, and he is a data transformation specialist. I was turned on to Ed by a friend of mine, a mutual friend, Wayne, who is a brilliant marketer, and he helps me out all the time. And he says, you've got to check this out. And what I love about your book, wait a minute, I'm going to introduce you first. I'm going to give you a chance to say hello. Edosa.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to be here. That's great to meet, and how fortune works. Meeting you through Wayne. So it's just great to be here.
And I'm also very lucky to get you because you're in Riyadh. You're, as far as opposite side of the world can go, you are in the opposite side of the world. So thank you very, very much. It's the middle of the night for you. Thanks for
Yes,
making the time.
and it's morning for you. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's good morning, good evening, no?
Good morning, good evening. Yeah, you can tell me what the stock market is doing tomorrow.
Right.
Um, so yeah, we met through in a strange sort of roundabout way through Wayne Kerrigan, who is a friend of mine, friend of yours. He's worked on projects with you, worked on projects with me, and I was fascinated by what you do. Obviously, I like the book. Anybody who buys this book, you got to know Making Data Work is a scary title. You could use a little help on the brand side with this, Ed, but it reads like a novel. And so it's a very, very good read, and it's fun to go through. If you want to bring it onto an airplane, it's like The Economist. Everybody will think you're a lot smarter, but despite all that, it's actually a fun read. So congratulations on the book, and you're working on another one.
Thank you. I am indeed. Yes, book two is it's actually pre-order just now. It's called Value Driven Data, and it's actually flying out off the shelves on the 3rd of August. It is.
Oh, congratulations. The sucker for
Thank you.
punishment, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what my wife says.
Let's get to it, because the format of
Sure.
Brands Investors Love, it's all about giving entrepreneurs tips and tricks on how to build a brand that not only will help them create a stronger company, but if they're looking for investment or a successful exit, it'll drive up their valuation. That's a side benefit. The prime benefit is that you're going to create a stronger company. And I wanted to talk, I've got 6 topics here that I wanted to talk about, but we've got a
Right.
15-minute time limit because I want to keep this short and snappy. Entrepreneurs got no time.
Mm.
So I want to keep it short and snappy. I wanted to talk in no particular order about data-driven insights, one of the most important things that you can talk about, because if you're going to figure out who you're talking to, who your audience is, you need to get insights. How can data help with that? Personalized marketing. Wouldn't it be cool if a marketer could talk to me and premeditate what I wanted? Competitive analysis. Who's who in the zoo? Who are your competitors? Brand relation management, which is, of course, what's going on out there, who's saying what about me and how can I control it? Performance tracking, how am I doing? And predictive modeling. At the end of the day, though, I want to leave it to you to just say, yes, I'm an expert in data, but if an entrepreneur who has very little experience with high-level data wants to get started and do something to build a better brand, this is what I would recommend. So
Mm.
it's over to you. I would just say, what would you recommend that an entrepreneur do to harness data effectively in order to build a better brand?
What a question. And look, data is very broad, right? And if you think about what is it you're actually trying to get out of data, I like to keep it. First thing I recommend is keep it simple. It can get very, very confusing. It's all data is what underpins AI and ChatGPT and all of that stuff, right? The new oil is the new oxygen, is whatever else, right? We need to keep it simple and tangible. So 4 things I'd normally say, in terms of keeping it simple. So you talked about data-driven insights. Actually, what you need is to first and foremost, understand one of those 4 questions. What has happened? What is a situation, with my business? What did I sell yesterday? Who did I sell it to? And so on, right? The question, what has happened? Looking behind you. is fundamental. It's where data has come from. It's what data was before the new age of data, right?
Mhm.
The second question you need to understand is kind of why did it happen? Because if you don't know why it happened, then your insights, your knowledge is just pain, right? because you can't work out, if you can't work out what's happened, how do you avoid it? Even as from a human insight standpoint. So data is sitting there and has the ability, especially now with new age techniques, to give you a sense of why it might have happened. And then the third thing, which you did mention, in terms of predictability, is about, could it happen again? What could then happen? So, for instance, if I, by chance, I can't work out why this has happened. I offered, customer A something I thought might be a cross sell, and they actually took it off you. You're thinking, that's great, but why did it happen? And then the question is, could it happen again? What factors do I need to be aware of that lead on to this kind of thing happening, right? So that's what, the very clever people call predictive analytics. But to be entirely honest, I think the most important question that most people actually don't typically answer or even think they should be answering it is, I know all this stuff. I know what's happened. I know why it's happened. I know what might happen. The big question and the thing that actually changes the course of events, the thing that actually changes businesses and puts pennies into your pocket is, what should I do about it? And that's the, I suppose you can call that prescriptive analytics. What's prescribing what are the best interventions. So I notice that somebody might be a good customer, might be a lead. I notice something might look like fraud. I notice that somebody might be on the path of having some sort of chronic disease in healthcare. What should I do about it? It seems a very simple question. The answer isn't quite so simple. I think there's 4 fundamental things that every business should be thinking about, but keeping it simple, starting with what's happened, gives you a head start, into every one of the other subsequent questions.
It's also remarkable, from my own experience, how little entrepreneurs know about this. They build up a business based on hunches and selling to people like themselves. And where I find it interesting is that they go, all right, we know kind of who bought this stuff. We think because they're people like us that they bought it for the same reason that we built it. We don't know how to keep them buying it. Well, there's no prescription for getting them to buy again, creating this sort of this flywheel effect of getting people to come back. And then you combine that with, if I want to take my business to the next level, I'm going to be dealing with a mainstream consumer, not an early adopter. What do they want? If somebody, a mainstream person bought it, I have no clue why, because they're not people like me. So most entrepreneurs are dealing with a sort of an idea that people are like themselves. And
Yes.
so, if you're like me, you're going to like this product because I like this product. That's why I made this product. So I'm an entrepreneur. Where do I start? I mean, once I know the 4 questions, what do I do? I mean, you're working in big companies, so this must be a bit of a head shaker. But imagine, you're working with a company of 20, 30 people. And I know you've done it. But I'm just curious, where do you start them?
Look, do you know, and one of the things, and big or small, and it might surprise you that the questions and the places people tend to want to start are no different. And people tend to want to start with data. They just want the data. They want to grab all the data. They want to find all the sources. Where's all the data? And then some people go, oh, algorithms. I need algos. I need some clever stuff, right? Now, what I typically would say is, it's almost like, the beginning of the chain is where the data is, and it goes through a number of transformations. It's lots of clever stuff, ETLs and all sorts of things, and build pipelines, and it does all this clever stuff, and then comes out the other end. I typically say to people, it might sound a bit strange, but start at the end. Start at what you're trying to get to. Right? Start at what is your ultimate objective here? What's your ultimate toward end? What is it you're actually trying to achieve? It would surprise you the number of people who would either go for that data, which is, the raw stuff, or do you know what? I just need to know what might happen in the future, right? I understand predictive analytics. I want to get some AI. Just get me some AI. I was sorted. The fundamental thing is, if you think about data as something that is out there for the purpose of optimization of your business, whatever that process actually is, then the big question you need to be asking yourself is, what am I trying to optimize? What is it that I'm trying to end up with, right? Mm-hmm. So if I was able to spot, a potential customer, right? What is it I'm trying for them to actually do? And it may sound like a simple question, or if I thought somebody was, potentially trying to leave a churn, as we call them, what should I do, right? I know it's about to happen, but there isn't a single, best answer to that question. Mm-hmm. It's all about what is it you're trying to do as a business. For instance, when people come to me, they might say to me, "Oh, I'm trying to grow." Right, I'm trying to grow my market share. Right, you might be trying to grow your market share, but what's that doing to your bottom line? Is it important? What's doing to your bottom line? And others that are focused on profitability, but the way you go about, these very broad questions, these very broad objectives, very, very, very different. What you're trying to optimize for is absolutely essential, and that's, if you start from that end, is what you then map back. But the problem, one of the big problems of starting at the beginning, if you like, of just grabbing data, is how much of it do you grab? How much do you need, right? Mm-hmm. And what do you do with it all? And lots of people end up in this data lake of stuff, which mm-hmm. is a bit of a dump, really, right? And where do you start? People talk about the quality of the data, the integrity of the data, and you're thinking about it all as this, an ocean of stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know where to start. So I say you start at the end, right? And then from the end, map back to the beginning, because actually you might only need 3 or 4, important data attributes, right? And by starting at the end, you can map it back in and then focus on the things that actually do matter for delivering the specifics you're actually trying to end up with.
It's funny because I'm old enough to remember the invention of the internet, and yeah, and I remember I built a digital department. I built a department around digital marketing at Gray, and I remember the number one questions that we would get from customers is they'd say, "I want a website," and we go, "How come?" The ultimate question, "How come you want a website?" They had no answer. So it's right. I want data. I want social media. What's a social media? I don't know. Just get me a social media. Just
I want an AI is a new one. I want an AI.
I want an AI. Give me an AI. How come? I don't know, because he has one, and I want exactly. I want 2. Get me 2 AIs. And it was the same question. And so much in marketing and building a business in general is start with, all right, where are you trying to get to? I want a customer to stick around. And I want to know how come. My big question always is have you found out how come customers buy something from you twice? Because the first one might have been a mistake, but the second one, they knew what they were doing. How come? They don't know. And that to me would seem to be like a very, very good question to start decluttering, like Spark Joy lady would do. Spark Joy, declutter, get rid of all the BS. Just say, start with, I want to talk to customers who bought it twice and find out how come. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think, there's all sorts of different, I think what you mentioned there is really about what a lot of advanced analytics was modeled around, if you like, which is find me a lookalike, find me something that looks like this. Find me something that looks like a guy who would be a repeat, purchaser, seller, or even a churner or fraud, right? It was all about pattern recognition for the purpose of finding lookalikes, right? Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, one way to think about advanced analytics is to say, if you were thinking about what would have happened before AI or before advanced analytics came in, you would say, the way I can automate my business or automate a process is to actually define a fixed rule, right? And if somebody buys, toilet paper, they're probably wanting some toothpaste as well, right? It's a fixed rule, and so offer them that, right? And there's automation, and that's one of the big differences between actually automation and advanced analytics, is that it's not only about that fixed rule, what you've defined, is actually what AI is trying to do is to recognize the patterns, what is leading on to this kind of correlation, want to call it, right? And that's what you go in and find. And what you just described there is saying, okay, I've just noticed that this person's bought two, right? What are the fundamental things about this kind of transaction, this kind of relationship? Is it about the demographics? Is it about the income, the age, the time of day? What is it about them? And can I then go out there and find similar, and target those similar to, and hopefully you're looking to hopefully get the same sort of outcomes. So that's in effect what AI was doing before ChatGPT, which is a whole different world. But one thing that's really important as well is that you're not only, even in that situation, you can think of many use cases that are really beneficial for going out there and finding more. Actually, a lot of use cases are actually trying to find the little needle in the haystack, if you like, which is really trying to sift out small signals from a whole bunch of noise. If you think about a use case like, I'm at the airport, who should I'm an airport security agent sort of thing, right? Of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people coming through the airport, which ones should I pick out, as a potential, terrorist or whatever else? And that's probably 1 in 100, 1 in a million, and it's a very difficult thing to pull out. But that's another kind of situation where actually it makes sense to use advanced analytics to try to answer that sort of question.
It would be incredible. I know that what investors buy, one of the primary things they buy is information and insight and data. If you have data, like one of the big things is, well, what they want to see is a mailing list. They want to see a mailing list of all the people who are buying your stuff or have bought your stuff, because then they want to sell them other stuff, and that's a good reason to invest in you. But this sort of analytical sort of interpretation on data, not just taking the fire hose of a mailing list, but figuring out what time of day somebody bought it, what particular job they hired your product to do, the Clayton Christensen sort of thing, the jobs theory, what they hired your product to do. That would be incredibly powerful. So can an entrepreneur, once they go, okay, I want to find out how or why somebody bought my stuff twice, my next question is, how available are you? Because the first thing they're going to do is go, okay, now I want to know why everybody bought my stuff twice. I better
Right.
one, buy the book, but two, I better call them up. So
Right.
who do they reach out to? What type of a person do they reach out to?
Right. So I think that you've got to be able to connect the dots, right? I think, man, this is the key thing. The kind of person really you want is somebody who can ask the right sorts of questions. If you ask the question, who would help me write some code? I would say, go and find yourself a machine learning engineer, go find yourself a data scientist, go find yourself a data engineer. But ultimately, these guys are only going to be able to help you if you understand what questions they need to help you answer, right? But just going back to your analogy of the mailing list, that really is what has happened, right? It's a bunch of people have done something, but why have they done it, right? And that's a fundamental question. And why have they done it? Is it likely to repeat, right? It's very interesting, actually. And COVID was, obviously, people say one in a lifetime sort of event, but it taught us a lot of things, especially in advanced analytics as well, in that, the patterns you think actually we can take for granted all went to pot overnight, right? And And that's something that doesn't happen, in our daily lives, to be fair, but it's something that happens a bit more gradually. The patterns change, behavior changes, human behavior, your customers' behavior. You might think person X did X today, would he do it again tomorrow? Or here's what fraud looks like today. Are those criminals or those people who are that way inclined to continue to do to X? You're finding them out, you're blocking those avenues. They are innovating
Mhm.
to X, right? So the whole piece around, understanding that whole trajectory is to understand the beyond the why, the predictive side is actually trying to learn as the situation kind of changes, as interactions kind of change, as transactions change. Where is it I should now be sort of diverting my attention? And that's a big difference actually between what you might do with advanced analytics, for instance, and a fixed rule, because a fixed rule would say that's the way life is, and that's the way it's always been done and continues to be so. But actually, the point around, and that's part of the reason why the term was coined, machine learning, is it's actually learning from actual events, actual things happening, and trying to work out from there what is the likely next sort of situation. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, you can get a mechanic, somebody who knows how to code, but the person you want is a dot connector, and that sounds like that's a tough role to fill. I think it's probably very, very thin on the ground, those type of people.
I'm afraid so. I think they are, because I think what you're looking for is someone that can connect with a business question, connect the skills, connect the how do you actually work it out, how do you measure what does success look like. And one of the funny stories in the book actually was this idea a lot of people are going to get some advanced analytics and it'll make things better, but it doesn't kind of always do that. You can actually put something in that could make things worse, right? And you can get worse outcomes. And what's fascinating is, and that whole brings things back into the sort of perspective of the measurement piece, and it's covered actually in partly in this book and in a second as well, is really that you need to be very clear as to what it is you're trying to achieve, what kind of value you're trying to get, how are you going to measure it, what does that good look like, and what are the specific interventions you're going to put in place to make that happen. So it's
I think starting with your outcome is probably a very good start, because even if they can't find themselves a good dot connector, I think a lot of people will at least know the sort of an outcome that they want to give their mechanic. Say, listen, this is the stuff I want to find it. So they still might be led astray. Like, again, going back to Jobs' theory, where it was with the milkshakes, where they said, well, should we make them thicker? Should we put more fruit in them? Should we make them smaller? Should we? And they're going, you would have designed something that would have created zero difference, if not a negative difference. You got to find out what people are hiring the milkshake to do. And that's the dot connector. But that's why you write books about this stuff, is because your skill set is thin on the ground. But I'm going to start by putting you out there on Brands Investors Love, and in my newsletter to all the folks that are helping me build Brand Investors Love, and put your skill set out there and say, hey, you can dial Edosa up, and maybe he'll get back to you, maybe he won't, but get his book first, because there's a ton of that stuff in the book. I can vouch for that. And maybe people will start to think about data in a different way from reading your book. Start to think about simple outcomes as opposed to saying, give me a fire hose of information.
I really absolutely do hope so, and that's why I wrote the book. I really wanted to put it out there. Some of the things I say in the book are a bit counterintuitive, but I think they have to be said, because I think they're helpful and actually move our minds in slightly different directions, and I hopefully are incredibly helpful to people.
Well, thank you so much. I've kept you up past your bedtime. I'm sorry about that.
It's fun actually. I didn't know what to expect, but this has been an incredibly fun chat. So thank you very much indeed. It's been great. It's been worth it.
Terrific. Have yourself a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.